Yeah.
So this question we get all the time, and it's come up quite frequently. And recently it has as well, right? Where people want to know what to do in a relationship when their significant other or their partner isn't working on themselves and they aren't like doing any inner work or self-work or trying to address any of their issues. And so you've got one person in the relationship that's like actively working on themselves and trying to improve and taking accountability,
looking in, expanding themselves.
Yes. And then you've got another person in the relationship that appears to be doing none of that.
Or even maybe hindering. Like, I like things the way they are. I don't want them to change. Right. I don't want you to change.
They're not
that
supportive.
Is scareful?
That is a scareful thing.
That's a scareful thing.
That's when you are scared and fearful. Scareful.
So what do you do?
Yeah, what do you do?
Your throat closes off for all.
And the thing that we always like to bring up first and foremost is, especially in relationships, like in a committed relationship or even a non-committed relationship, in partnerships, what is happening in that relationship and what the other person is causing you to feel is an invitation for you to then look internally with what that is actually bringing up inside of you. So we'll just use us for an example. And this is, I mean, we went through this for sure, right? We've both gone through this over the course of our relationship, but just for the sake of this question, if I feel like I am like reading a lot of self-help books and I'm listening to all of these podcasts and I'm starting to like eat differently and I'm trying to go for walks and I'm trying to exercise and I'm trying to do all of these things to improve my mental and emotional and like physical health. And then Stephanie isn't.
Watching soap operas all day and what else?
I think that's it. Just watching soap
I was going to be like eating, because it's the whole thing. But,
Right.
you know, since we went into this, I went into the stereotypical, like what soaps and bonbons used to be the thing that people would say. Like whatever
Our
your
generation
judgment
will know
is.
what you're talking about.
Yeah, right. It just seems like I'm not doing anything. I'm
Exactly.
and resisting or maybe secretly sabotaging your efforts.
Yeah, like, hey, do you want to go for a walk? No, I don't want to go for a walk. Hey, do you want to read this book? No, I don't want to read that book.
Yeah.
Anyways, you get the picture.
Yeah.
But
So
what I have to do first and foremost is when I have awareness of that, the reaction oftentimes is to just direct everything at that partner. So I'm trying to say, hey, Stephanie, why don't you do something? Hey, Stephanie, why don't you go for a walk with me? Hey,
So what
Stephanie,
are you feeling when I'm not doing that?
So what I'm saying is that's oftentimes what people do first is they project everything outwards at that partner. So if you're doing that, there's nothing wrong with that. It's totally normal. Take a pause and just reflect on what's coming up inside of you.
Exactly. So what are your projections? What are you perceiving me? Like trying to define that for a minute. Like if I'm not doing this, like just throw some examples out there. Like I would say, like I'm not supporting you. I'm not making an effort. We'll just use those two for that. Okay. I'm not showing up. So then you can look at that. Okay. Not being supported, not making efforts and not showing up. So then you can look at yourself and be like, okay, where did I feel this? Where have I felt this for the first time? Where have I felt unsupported? Where have I felt like efforts weren't made? Where have I felt like people didn't show up for me? And then where am I not supporting myself or others? Where am I not making an effort? Where could I be making? Where am I not showing up? So those things that I'm showing you are now all of these points. You can go into some core work and you can go into like, it's showing you where areas where you yourself can start making improvements. I'm giving you the opportunity to see what you're not doing, but you can't see in yourself. You're projecting it out.
Yes. So that's the first thing that we always recommend is rather than project everything outwards at that partner, and then you get caught into those loops and into those patterns where you're just blaming each other and they're defensive and you're the person that's trying to help them. Like, come on, we totally.
Like, why are you trying to change me? Why are you trying to control me?
Rather than getting caught into that dynamic, into that loop, just look at what it's causing you to feel first and foremost. And then you have to have a real conversation with your partner. You have to be able to communicate, hey, not you aren't doing anything, but I feel like I'm trying to think of how to articulate this because it's so hard to articulate like I statements when they are triggered by
someone
other person's behavior.
Yes. It's so hard to use those I statements, but they're so important.
So the idea is I'm not judging you for what you are doing or aren't doing. I'm simply expressing to you what it causes me to feel.
Like when it appears that you are not showing up, I feel afraid that
like you're not
this relationship doesn't matter to you, that you don't matter.
That you don't, I mean, truthfully, it boils down to, I think oftentimes that you don't actually feel loved by your partner because they aren't showing up in the relationship and they aren't like caring about what you're doing. And I mean, it plays out in all sorts of different ways that we could elaborate on forever and ever and ever and ever.
I have another one that I'm going to elaborate on.
Go ahead.
With that. No, keep going. I'm just saying, like, we could elaborate forever and ever. I'm like, we're going to. This is the podcast of people who over-explain.
Go ahead.
You want me to jump in and take over?
Well, not take over, but what else are you going to elaborate on?
I will write it down. Keep going.
Well, I don't remember. Basically, that's your opportunity to have a real conversation with them about what is happening for you and what your experience is, rather than what they aren't doing. Mm-hmm. And those type of conversations take time and space. You have to create the environment for them. They're not the type of conversations that you have after like a busy day or something like that. It's like we wake up in the morning, or you just have to find time where you can communicate without distraction, and you can know that that person is actually tapped in and listening to you. So it takes practice to be like, hey, this is an important thing that I want to talk to you about. When would be a good time for us to talk? Cool. We set up a time to talk. I'm feeling this X, Y, and Z. And that it doesn't have to be anything else besides that. It doesn't be, I'm feeling this. What are you going to do to change? I'm feeling this. Now you have to fix whatever it is that you aren't doing. I'm feeling this. How are you going to make me feel better? It doesn't have to be any of that. It just can simply be, I'm feeling this. And then the work goes back to you. The work goes back to you recognizing how do they respond in that moment and how does that make you feel? What are their actions then mirroring for you to look at and go internally? Because, and I think you and I are a good example of this, Steph, where it's like oftentimes in relationships, I think it feels like a competition where you're competing with your partner for like whatever, right? Superiority, control, all the different really unhealthy things that we get taught.
Worth, showing society, that you're worthy, right? By what you accomplish.
All sorts of different things.
For the love.
And even like just from the really inner child little perspective of like, I'm going to win this race or whatever, right? So we get this competition mentality and we go back and forth. And when it comes into the space of like healing and self-improvement, it plays out like, hey, I'm showing up for like myself and I'm trying to show up for our relationship and you aren't doing your work. You aren't doing anything. So then they get defensive and then they get shut down and it just spirals so quickly. So you have to be very conscious of not allowing that thought process and even just having awareness if that's taking place and shifting it up to where you're loving and supporting that person no matter what they're choosing to do. And this might go on for years. And at some point you may have to ask yourself some harder questions, but just get into the practice of their best or what they deem to be self-help or work, or even just like them changing, they might be doing the absolute best that they can. And our best always changes.
Our best always changes. And to spin off on all of that is something like this is, when you look at the core of this, what is coming up is you are, in a sense, judging them for not showing up the way that you have decided what showing up looks like. So when you start to really dive in, everybody has a different journey on working on themselves, and everybody has a different timeline of when they're able to fully show up in that space. And so where you are now ready to make these efforts and make these changes does not mean that that's where your partner is now responsible for being for themselves or for you, for the relationship. You got to this point, and how they are showing up is only a judgment, is only a mirror. And then feeling judged, because when you start doing all those things, so maybe they're throwing judgments at you because it's rocking what is comfortable. It's rocking, like change is scary. Change, like we've talked about that before. We should probably go into that again. Change doesn't always mean bad, but change triggers the fear. It triggers the fight or flight, especially when things have been like a chaotic and unstable environment in the past. So when they feel change, it's like, oh, like now I'm afraid. Now I'm afraid. So in order to curb that, like I'm judging you on that and making your choices wrong because I want you to stay. So that's where that sabotage comes in. It's rarely a conscious choice to sabotage. It's more often a subconscious behavior that is coming out from fear and from past traumas. So realizing it first, like them not doing the work is a judgment on them. So when you get ready for this real conversation that you're going to have, be invested in not only like speaking clearly your wants and needs for yourself and how you would like to move the relationship with your partner, but be equally, if not more, invested in hearing their experience and hearing what's going on, hearing the things that they are processing and working on. Just because you can't see it in the way that you are displaying it doesn't mean that they are not in it and actively working on themselves. Maybe at that moment, working on themselves is keeping their head above water.
Yeah.
Just keeping their head above water, trying to be as present as they can, keeping a job, working with kids, like all of these different ways. I don't need to get into all the explanations. So I make sure that everybody feels heard and seen, like just your experience is that. So what they are going through, even when you are partners, you don't know. You don't know unless you listen when they tell you. They have to show up and express, and you have to listen without judgment on what they should be doing or what you think they're going to say or your opinion of how difficult a situation may or may not be for them. So be ready to hear that and listen. When you create a safe environment for people to show up in, it's a lot easier for them to show up. And when you get out of your head of what it looks like when somebody shows up, just because like we may resonate with you or this person may resonate and that's how it looks like, doesn't mean that's what it is for everybody. Yeah. Like we have each changed the way that we work on ourselves and what resonates for us over and over and over and over again. As it's grown, we've went in different directions over and over again, because as you're growing and you're healing, it changes, it shifts. And for a while it was just keeping our heads above water. So I invite you, when your partner's not doing the work, to be open to those conversations, really hear, and then keep going. Keep working on yourself. You don't need them to work on themselves the way you see it for you to keep going. Keep healing, keep improving. That, not only do you deserve that, are you worth that? Is that what it's about? But things change. The vibration shifts. And maybe it doesn't. Like you said, maybe harder conversations come. Maybe like people can outgrow people. And when people aren't held to the judgment and accountability of the partner standard, we're allowed to grow at different rates. And sometimes you're up here being like, what are they doing? And then they catapult. You got some stuff. So it's not that brings the competition thing up. It's not a competition on where you're at, who's doing more work, who's achieving, who's getting left behind, because that's another thing. They might be really feeling left behind and that they can't keep up with you and they don't know where to start. And then you're judging them for it, which only reinforces that worthlessness of not being able to match. Like all of these things, it just keeps going. So it comes down to be willing to hear them and keep doing your own work. Keep doing your own work, regardless of who is showing up the way you see it. Keep finding what resonates with you and being compassionate about how, when you're shifting and changing the relationship, how that will affect your partner. Not that you need to stop, but their feelings are valid too. And so those conversations are, they're so crucial. And then learning how to have those conversations, that's trial and error. You're going to fuck it up over and over and over again. They are going to. You just got to keep trying as long as you want to.
I think that having compassion for what their experience is and what they're going through is the key. And when you go from compassion to criticism, then that's more about you and less about them. Anytime you're trying to criticize your partner, or you find your thought patterns and your internal thinking as well as your external actions and words from this place of judgment and criticism, that should be the key for you to pause and look at what is coming up inside of you and why, and what their actions are actually causing you to feel. That's where it becomes your work, not about what they're doing, but what about you can process. Is there anything else you want to add to it?
I have something that just came, so I do want to say.
Please.
Self-love and encouragement is never a weapon. So when you are doing this, using it as a weapon for where they are lacking is not helpful. That is not helpful. And it's like, that's not the intention. So watch, are you weaponizing your work?
Let us know what you think. And if you have any other ideas that you'd like to share with us, feel free to reach out. You can email us once again at energyislove. Nope, it's info@energyislove.
That's what I do. Every reel, I always say energyislove.love. I always forget the info at.
Yeah, let us know your thoughts on that. And you can also email us anytime you have questions.
Yes.